Welcome to the Brett Davis Podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Brett Davis Podcast, coming to you from beautiful Coronado, California. I'm very honored today to have not just a guest, but somebody that I consider a friend, a mentor, somebody that I think is a great person I'm glad he's come into my life, because there's just some times in your life when you're trying to find, well, I'll be honest, this is what happened. My mother passed away not too long ago, and my mom was a teacher. And that was a very challenging time for me. And I wasn't really talking to a lot of people. And then we had this little gathering in San Diego around Halloween. Leigh came and he said this, everything that he said, somehow it just healed and helped me get through that situation. So I don't believe in accidents, and I do appreciate the friendship, and thank you for being so authentic and real the way you are. I appreciate it. Your Leigh Steinberg, in my mind, is probably, of course, don't be shy, because I know you are. It's probably one of in my mind, the goat of the top sports agents, probably one of the best ever. He is the Michael Jordan, Mahomes at what he does, and then some. And he's also a strategist and a philosopher, in a way that he has a way of getting his messages across. And he's a huge humanitarian and just does so much for his community all around the world. Leigh Steinberg, thank you for being on my show.
My pleasure.
I talk so much. I should be in radio, huh? Oh, I am in radio. But you have this amazing way of tapping into things that you seem to be ahead of the game all the time with everything you do. Is that something you learned, or is that instinctive, or how do you do that?
Well, I think one thing that's really helpful is reading a lot. So that I read about 6 newspapers a day, magazines, monitor media. So the more information you have, the better able someone is to have vision and see now but where it's going in terms of business or sports or entertainment or politics. And so I think that is helpful. The more information you have, the more you're able to make an analysis which helps you see into the future.
So, when you meet somebody and you talk to them, I think you either connect more with some people than others. I connected with you right away. One thing I liked about what you were telling me about how you choose partners or people that you want to work with. The one thing you had mentioned, and you can elaborate more than I can, of course, because you're the one that shared this with me. You like to meet their families. You like to see their environment. You like to find out what their belief is, and other than just the things around them. What is their spiritual belief? I mean, how can you add to that? Because I think, imagine if everybody did that with everything they did.
So I think the most critical skill that can help you navigate your way gracefully through life is the ability to listen. Everyone thinks it's about talking and persuasion, but actually, if you will hone your listening skills and draw another human being out so that you cut below the surface, you peel back the layers of the onion. And I think every woman watching will be in agreement that men don't share their deep emotional feelings quite as easily as women do. So you need to ask the right questions and create enough trust and stillness around another person that they'll reveal themselves. And if you can understand someone else's deepest anxieties and fears and greatest hopes and dreams, and put yourself into their heart and mind, you can navigate your way gracefully, as I said. More important is trying to find values matches. So if you take a young person and ask them how they feel about short-term economic gain, money that would come quickly, long-term economic security, geographical location, living in a certain size of a city or area of the country, if you take spiritual beliefs, if you take family considerations, if you take autonomy, if you take making a difference in the world, and you go through these values, if you surround yourself with people who are reflective of the same values that you have, then you have a much better chance to have successful relationships in business and in life.
Did you learn this through osmosis, or does somebody teach you this?
Um, I love people, so I've always been involved with other people, and I found early that if you make a surface assessment that could almost be like a stereotype of who you think someone is by what they're wearing or by how they look or how many tattoos they have, you may be misled. And you need to get deeper because people will endlessly surprise you very often in positive ways about the depth of who they are and what they know. So um, I ended up, I was student body president of all the schools I was ever in, but it was mostly, uh, but because of listening and trying to understand someone else's perspective. If you are self-absorbed and spend all your time thinking about yourself, or you're in your own head, you're not able to reach out and be of service or value to anybody else.
When you were back in the days at Berkeley, when you were the student body president, and you did a phenomenal job, of course, when did you realize that you probably were going to be an attorney, and let alone be a sports attorney agent?
Well, Brett, from an attorney standpoint, I grew up and I had a father who had two core values. One was treasure relationships, especially family. But the second was try to make a meaningful, positive difference in the world and be responsible for helping people who couldn't help themselves. So I was always hardwired to go out in the world and make a difference. And I read about attorneys like Clarence Darrow or some of the attorneys in the civil rights movement and people who did important things. And I thought, well, there used to be shows on in the 50s. There were lots of lawyer shows. There were Perry Mason and Judd for the defense and the defenders. And so I thought, well, that's what I'll do. With thought, probably I was sort of raised to be political and to be a politician. I never could have prepared for a life as a sports agent or agent attorney because there was no organized field of sports agentry. So as I've discussed with you, I fell into it because I was a dorm counselor in an undergraduate dorm, and they moved the freshman football team in the dorm. And one of the students that was the quarterback, named Steve Bartkowski, and in 1975 he became the very first player selected in the first round of the NFL draft, and asked me to represent him. And there I was. I had traveled for a year and a half after getting out of law school in 73. And now it's 1975, and I've just come back. And there was no guaranteed right of representation in the collective bargaining agreement for players. So a team could just hang up the phone and say, we don't deal with agents. So it was very rudimentary, and the economics of the sport were real rudimentary in baseball and basketball and football. And but it's evolved over time.
Well, when did that, after 73, you said, when did you see the changes happening where agents started having a little bit more respect and say so for other clients?
It came in the collective bargaining agreement in 1977. So that first got a guaranteed right of representation. But then I looked at sports like football and I said, you know what? TV is about to expand here. Right now we have 3 networks and a couple independent stations, but that's going to change because the wiring is going to change. And along comes cable TV and satellite TV, and you have 300 networks. And I knew that would have a dynamic effect on rights fees because football is or baseball or basketball are a loss leader. So I remember talking to Rupert Murdoch about the fact that Fox needed to bid on football. And what he could do is no one was watching it back then. It had Beverly Hills 90210, 21 Jump Street, and a lot of test patterns. So I knew that if they got people to watch the promos on Sunday for Monday through Friday programming, which is where the big profitability comes, that they could expand their network. And so when CBS dropped out, they dropped to the bottom in ratings, and Fox actually built their whole network. So I saw that, and then I could see that there were changes that were going to come in stadia. And football, I loved baseball, I loved basketball, did a lot of players in them, but football somehow captured American taste as it's existed in the last 30, 40 years, which is fast action, conflict, hitting, an event-based sport that came once a week. So big build-up, big analysis post-game. And TV grew up with football. So the different camera angles and the different concepts, they grew up together. And then you could see that once the sport became popular enough, there'd be concepts like fantasy. There'd be concepts like VR that could come along. And remember, when I started in 1975, there were no personal computers. When your phone rang and you were on the phone, it rang busy. And people won't remember, but this whole world, this whole internet, as we know it today, largely exploded in about 15 years ago.
And how we're doing business now because of the pandemic. I mean, can you imagine if we had information about the pandemic, what we could have done as far as investing in StreamYard and what's the other one? Zoom. Can you imagine if we had that crystal ball and invested in Zoom very early on, because we knew the whole conference thing was already happening, but I don't think, I think people thought it was coming along, but the pandemic seemed to speed up everything more. And we have more people now working at home than any other time.
Well, we do. And the problem is people have forgotten that the best way to communicate is person to person, in person. The second best way to communicate is over Zoom or a forum like this. The next best way is over the phone. Moving way down is emailing, and below that is texting. And behavioral scientists have very cleverly addicted, especially the younger generation, to getting endorphins and serotonin and dopamine every time they get a like or every time they get texted. So it's created a whole generation that's forgotten about personal interaction and personal contact, and are anxious because, oh my God, they sent out a text and it's been 30 whole seconds and nobody responded. So they must not like you. They must think that you must have done something wrong. Or you post something and it doesn't get a lot of likes, and oh my God, how embarrassing. Well, it's not. So you got to keep in mind what the best forms of communication are. And people get into text wars, right? One party texts another party, and they mean it as a joke, but there's no context to understand. And the other person gets offended. So they then shoot back a provocative text. And then the first person who sent the first text sends back something a little elevated in conflict, and back and forth. Brett, there was never anything wrong with their relationship in the first place. And now they're in a text war.
Analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
So you've been doing your event for 35 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did that start?
So I thought that every party I went to at the Super Bowl was noisy, so that you couldn't talk and really relate. They were dark. They were boozy with people talking babble. They were overcrowded. And I thought there's got to be a way to put my players, their families, veteran players, retired players, and then create a charitable theme where we can use sports to make an impact in the world, and then and making an event where people could network. And so I created a daytime event with ambient noise, and we have always been charity based. And the year that there was a bad earthquake in Haiti, people were dying because of impure drinking water. So we sent a machine down directly from the party that purified water for 140,000 people a day, or we auctioned off a car for autism. Uh, uh, Charitable foundations, or and we started doing things to make sure the party fit the time, place, and manner of the situation. So when we had soldiers in Afghanistan and Iraq, we would have a live hookup where they could interact with the party. We brought first responders. To this one, I'm going to bring some nurses and doctors who have been fighting the pandemic fight. So we tried to make it sensitive to that. And then we started giving humanitarian awards to an owner, a general manager, a player, for the good things they do to try to make a positive impact in the community. And so at this next party, we'll have the general manager of the Rams, Les Snead, and the general manager of the Chargers, Tom Telesco, will both get awards for charitable things they've done away from football. So we put some highlight on things. Then we also mixed in, I've been fighting the battle for awareness, prevention, and cure for concussion for over 30 years now, and had a series of concussion conferences. And so we run a brain health summit in the hour coming up to the party. So the party is 1 to 5, but this goes from 12 to 1. And then I tried to pick iconic venues. So last time it was in Los Angeles, we used the back lot of 20th Century Fox, which was the set of Old New York.
Yeah.
Hello, Dolly. And this time we're Sony Studios, which is the old MGM, and it's got all sorts of fun stuff, from the Ghostbusters car to everything in the world out on those sets. So it'll be fun. And we're doing a brain lounge for protocols and treatments and modalities that can help athletes recover quicker, can help baby boomers like me enjoy better health for a longer period of time. That's hyperbaric oxygen and stem cell, and a process called RTMS and light stem, and a series of other breakthrough biomed treatments.
But the pharmaceutical industry is so powerful. It's a double-edged sword. How do you think the treatments and types of things you just mentioned, like hyperbaric, how is that going to affect that industry at all? I mean, do you see that being more productive?
I think that we're going to extend lifespan for young people born today, because they'll be into preventative medicine. We all know that you can't patent an herb, but there are things in the trees and plants on this earth that are healing. Some of the technology is healing. So let's take hyperbaric. There's an Israeli study that shows that if you do 40 hyperbaric sessions, which is enhanced oxygen, and you lie in a chamber, but so you're not bored, they have Netflix up on the TV above you. And it's been shown that it extends the telomeres, which are the functional building blocks of life and presage how long you live, by 20% with 40 sessions, and by 25% with 60 sessions. So as they continue to innovate in these areas, I think it'll revolutionize medicine. We'll look back on the days where they put poison into people to kill cancer as being somehow barbaric.
Yeah, and even surgeries. All that type of stuff, I think, is going to be, I mean, it's like kind of like going back to the days of George Washington, and they used to be really big into the whole bleeding thing, and also leeches. But I understand leeches are still being used in some cases now and then, but I don't disagree with you, and I think it is the future. It's the now, and it's going to expand. But again, you're cutting edge because you're having this at your party, and that's going to be coming up on the 12th at Sony Studios.
February 12th, 12 to 1 for the Brain Health Summit, where we've got neurologists and different panelists talking about state of the art of what we know about the TBI, traumatic brain injury, and then new modalities that can potentially help. And then the party goes from 1 to 5. And at 3 o'clock, we break and do all those presentations. So we're giving a Michael Johnson, the sprinter, who's dealt with his own concussion problems, is going to get an award. And then a couple active players, retired players. Rolf Benershka is getting one from your area that developed really our first, in some ways, big program for charity, which was Kicks for Critters, which enhanced the fund for endangered species at the San Diego Zoo. So he was a field goal kicker. So every time he kicked a field goal, he gave money to the zoo. And then there were posters and pledge cards proliferating throughout San Diego and into the interior that allowed people to match at their own level. And that became the genesis for the programs you see now that have a corporation or a company match some player's performance.
Well, you were kind of the brainchild, the two of you together on that, and now look at where everything's expanded.
Well, that's the whole point. Is that look? I had a father who said that when you're looking for someone to solve a problem, that the tendency was to look to they or them to solve it, right? As little as picking up a piece of paper off the floor or as massive as climate change. He'd say you'd wait for older people, political figures, someone else said it, and he'd look at me and he'd say, you could wait forever, son. The they is you. You are the they. You have the responsibility. So we all in our own ways can do things to, enhance the world. Simply parenting well is a great addition to the earth.
I appreciate everything you do. I know you've had such a huge impact on so many individuals. I mean, we have to do a whole. Well, they're making a document. You're making a documentary. I was going to say you're doing that right now, and that's. I don't know if you're ever going to get that film done.
Well, I think they'll start filming at the Super Bowl party.
That's really cool.
And I'm working on another book.
Oh, how many books have you done now?
Well, I've done 2, but I've done chapters in different and best-selling anthologies. But I did one on negotiating, which was called Winning with Integrity, How to Get What You Want Without Losing Your Soul. And then the last one I did was The Agent. My 40 years making deals and changing the game.
So what's next? I mean, you've done so much already. I mean, where is Leigh Steinberg going? Because you're still relatively young. You look phenomenal. You look very healthy. I know you worked at this. You love to go to Hawaii and heal there, which I like to go there myself. What's next? Because you've done so much, and I'm sure you have other things you want to do.
Well, first of all, we continue encouraging athletes to be role models and to focus on second careers. So while we have a young CEO, Chris Cabot, running the firm, I still have some involvement in that. But then again, it's can we create new companies? I'm doing agent academies and sports career conferences to bring along the next generation of sports professionals with ethics and values, but who've been trained. So you go to law school, business school, you go to sports marketing, and they teach you the principles. But here we teach you how to recruit, how to establish an agency or a business, how to negotiate, how to set up a charitable foundation, how to market and brand. So I'm going to continue with those, and then we still can deal with bullying and sex trafficking and domestic violence and racism and the environment.
There's a lot to do.
Yeah.
Well, anything we can help you with, because those are all things I'm very passionate about. We're on the same page with all of that. I feel like we're cut from the same cloth.
I agree, and I thought your event that helped save endangered elephants was speaking to a really important cause.
Yeah, because we don't live in Africa, we don't realize what's really going on over there. I mean, we have our own major problems going on now. But when you do things the way you do, which is give and you help so many people, we need more of that in the country right now. We shouldn't be at odds with whatever the differences are. We need to find commonality and find a way. I mean, how did you get through when you were at Berkeley? How did the 60s, was everybody able to get over the differences in belief of Vietnam and find ways to? I mean, was it just a period of time that
people who think this is the most divisive time certainly didn't live through the 60s, because it alienated kids that were listening to rock music and using herbal substances and long hair and beards and tie-dye and philosophy and opposition to war in Vietnam. It had much of the same effect. But what really should be pulling us together is our commonality. Because if you think I'm breaking up a friendship with someone because they feel differently about tariffs, friends all over the political spectrum. And if you think about it, Brett, not to be corny, but we've been blessed through an accident of birth to live in the freest country on earth with democracy and institutions and a high standard of living. And I didn't fight in the wars. We didn't do anything to earn that. So that should hold us all together. And everyone cares about family, and people care about faith, and we have all sorts of commonalities. And it really is, what's happened today is that people watch such different news sources and have such different sets of news, they come to completely opposite conclusions. And we used to have a commonality and understanding that Walter Cronkite was delivering news that was objective. And so, but we have to bring things back together because, this country has foreign enemies, but we're all Americans.
we should be loving each other and finding a way just to be respectful, because this country has so much issues with mental health and homelessness. Those are the things we should be worrying about, is making sure that nobody's on the streets, and that also people have some type of mental clarity of what and where and who they are. And kids shouldn't have to worry about going outside and playing. But I appreciate your time. I know you're really busy getting ready for your party, and I appreciate your time, and it's always good to see you, and we look forward to seeing you at your party.
Thanks, Brett. See you there.
Thank you, Leigh. You take care of yourself.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.